Again, welcome.
Sadness from wherever you've been, come broken-hearted, let the rescue begin. Come find your mercy, O sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Lay down your burden.
And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them,
"Tonight you will all desert me, for it is written in the Scriptures that God will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been brought back to life again, I will go to Galilee and meet you there."
And Peter declared,
"If everyone else deserts you, I won't."
The truth is that this very night, before the cock crows at dawn, you will deny me 3 times.
I would die first.
and all the other disciples said the same thing. Then Jesus brought them to a garden grove, Gethsemane, and told them to sit down and wait while he went on ahead to pray. He took Peter with him and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and began to be filled with anguish and despair. And then he told them,
"My soul is crushed with horror and sadness to the point of death. Stay here. Stay awake with me."
He went forward a little and fell face downward on the ground and prayed,
"My Father, if it is possible, let this cup be taken away from me. But I want your will, not mine."
Jesus prayed in the garden and poured out his heart for me. There has been no love shown by mortals as in dark Gethsemane. Dark Gethsemane. He could have chosen not to suffer treatment of the cruelest kind, but the lips of my pure Savior uttered not my will, but not my will, but not my will, but not my will, but not my will, but
Then Jesus returned to the 3 disciples and found them asleep.
"Peter, couldn't you even stay awake with me 1 hour? Keep alert and pray. Otherwise, temptation will overpower you. For the spirit indeed is willing, but how weak the body is."
Again, he left them and prayed,
"My Father, if this cup cannot go away until I drink it all, your will be done."
He returned to them again and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So he went back to pray the 3rd time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said,
"Sleep now and take your rest. But no, the time has come. I am betrayed into the hands of evil men. Up, up, let's be going. Look, here comes the man who is betraying me."
At that very moment, while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived with a great crowd sent by the Jewish leaders armed with swords and clubs. Judas had told them to arrest the man he greeted, for that would be the one they were after. So, now Judas came straight to Jesus and said,
Hello, Master.
and embraced him in a friendly fashion.
"My friend, Go ahead and do what you have come for."
Then the others grabbed him.
Why did it have to be a friend who chose to betray the Lord? And why did he use a kiss to show them that's not what a kiss is for? Only a friend can betray a friend. A stranger has nothing to gain. Only a friend comes close enough to ever cause so much pain. Why did there have to be a thorny cross upon his head? It should have been a royal one made of jewels and gold instead. It had to be a crown of thorns because in this life that we live, all who would seek to love a thorn is all the world has to give. Why did it have to be a heavy cross he was made to bear? And why did they nail his feet and hands? His love would have held him there. It was a cross around a cross the thief was supposed to bear. And Jesus had gone into the world to steal every heart away. Yes, Jesus had come into the world to steal every heart away.
One of the men with Jesus pulled out a sword and slashed off the ear of the high priest's servant.
"Put away your sword. Those using swords will get killed. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what is happening now?
Then Jesus spoke to the crowd.
Am I some dangerous criminal that you had to arm yourselves with swords and clubs before you could arrest me? I was with you teaching daily in the temple, and you didn't stop me then. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures."
At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul.
led him to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where all the Jewish leaders were gathering. Meanwhile, Peter was following far to the rear and came to the courtyard of the high priest's house and went in and sat with the soldiers and waited to see what was going to be done to Jesus. The chief priests, and in fact the entire Jewish Supreme Court, assembled there and looked for witnesses who would lie about Jesus in order to build a case against him that would result in a death sentence. But even though they found many who agreed to be false witnesses, these always contradicted each other. Finally, 2 men were found who declared,
"This man said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'"
Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus,
Well, what about it? Did you say that, or didn't you?
but Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him,
I demand, in the name of the living God, that you tell us whether you claim to be the Messiah, the Son of God.
Yes, I am. And in the future you will see me, the Messiah, sitting at the right hand of God and returning on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his own clothing, shouting,
Blasphemy! What need have we for other witnesses? You have all heard him say it. What is your verdict?
Death! 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 Death!
Holy Jesus, hast thou offended, that we to judge thee, and in hate pretended, by force derided, by thine own rejected, O most afflicted, who was the guilty, who brought this upon thee? Alas, my treason, Jesus hath undone thee. 'Twas thy Lord Jesus, it was denied thee. I crucified thee.
Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying,
Prophesy to us, you Messiah.
Who struck you that time?
Meanwhile, as Peter was sitting in the courtyard, a girl came over and said to him,
You were with Jesus, for both of you are from Galilee.
but Peter denied it loudly.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Later, out by the gate, another girl noticed him and said to those standing around,
This man was with Jesus from Nazareth.
Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath.
I don't even know the man.
But after a while, the men who had been standing there came over to him and said,
We know you are one of his disciples, for we can tell by your Galilean accent."
Peter began to curse and swear,
I don't know the man.
and immediately the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went away, crying bitterly. When it was morning, the chief priests and the Jewish leaders met again to discuss how to induce the Roman government to sentence Jesus to death. Then they sent him in chains to Pilate, the Roman governor. About that time, Judas, who betrayed him, when he saw that Jesus had been condemned to die, changed his mind and deeply regretted what he had done, and brought back the money to the chief priests and the other Jewish leaders.
I have sinned, for I have betrayed an innocent man.
That's your problem.
Then Judas threw the money onto the floor of the temple and went out and hanged himself. The chief priests picked the money up.
We can't put it in the collection, since it's against our laws to accept money paid for murder.
They talked it over and finally decided to buy a certain field where the clay was used by potters and to make it into a cemetery for foreigners who died in Jerusalem. That is why the cemetery is still called the Field of Blood. This fulfilled the prophecy of Jeremiah, which says, "They took 30 pieces of silver, the price at which he was valued by the people of Israel, and purchased a field from the potters as the Lord directed me." Now, Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor.
Are you the Jews' Messiah?
Yes.
But when the chief priests and the other Jewish leaders made their many accusations against him, Jesus remained silent.
When they crucified my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word.
When they crucified my Lord, and he never said a mumbling word. Friend, you know they crucified
Don't you hear what they are saying?"
But Jesus said nothing, much to the governor's surprise. Now, the governor's custom was to release one Jewish prisoner each year during the Passover celebration, anyone they wanted. This year, there was a particularly notorious criminal in jail named Barabbas. And as the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them,
"Which shall I release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, your Messiah?"
For he knew very well that the Jewish leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy because of his popularity with the people. Just then, as he was presiding over the court, Pilate's wife sent him this message:
Leave that good man alone, for I had a terrible nightmare concerning him last night.
Meanwhile, the chief priests and the Jewish officials persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas' release and for Jesus' death. So, when the governor asked again,
"Which of these two shall I release to you?"
the crowd shouted back their reply:
Barabbas!
"Then what shall I do with Jesus, your
Crucify
Messiah?"
him!
Crucify him!
"Why? What has he done wrong?"
But they kept shouting.
Crucify him!
Crucify him!
Crucify him!
When Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing,
Crucify
he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying,
"I am innocent of the blood of this good man.
Crucify
The responsibility is yours."
and the mob yelled back,
His blood be on us and on our children.
Then Pilate released Barabbas to them. And after he had whipped Jesus, he gave him to the Roman soldiers to be taken away and crucified. But first they took him into the armory and called out the entire contingent. They stripped Jesus and put a scarlet robe on him and made a crown from long thorns and put it on his head and placed a stick in his right hand as a scepter and knelt before him in mockery.
Hail the King of the Jews!
They yelled, and they spat on him and grabbed the stick and beat him on the head with it.
Sacred head now wounded, with grief and shame weighed down, now scornfully surrounded, with thorns thine only crown. O sacred head, what glory, what bliss till now was thine. Yet though despised and gory, I joy to call thee mine. How pale thou art with anguish, with sore abuse and scorn. How does thy face now languish, which once was bright as morn? Thy grief and bitter
After the mockery, they took off the robe and put his own garment on him again and took him out to crucify him. As they were on the way to the execution grounds, they came across a man of Cyrene in Africa, Simon was his name, and forced him to carry Jesus' cross. Then they went out to an area known as Golgotha, that is, Skull Hill, where the soldiers gave him drugged wine to drink. But when he had tasted it, he refused. After the crucifixion, the soldiers threw dice to divide up his clothes among themselves. They sat around and watched him as he hung there. They put a sign above his head, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews."
The nails in your hands, the nail in your feet. Tell me how much you love me. The thorns on your brow, they tell me how you bore so much shame to love me.
Two robbers were also crucified there that morning, one on either side of him. And the people passing by hurled abuse, shaking their heads at him and saying,
So, you can destroy the temple and build it again in 3 days, can you? Well, then come on down from the cross if you're the Son of God.
And the chief priests and the Jewish leaders also mocked him.
He saved others, but he can't save himself.
So, you are the King of Israel, are you? Come down from the cross and maybe we'll believe you.
He trusted God. Let God show his approval by delivering him. Didn't he say, I am God's son?
And the robbers also threw the same insults. That afternoon, the whole earth was covered in darkness for 3 hours, from noon until 3 o'clock. About 3 o'clock, Jesus shouted,
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani,
which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and put it on a stick and held it up for him to drink. But someone said,
Leave him alone. Let's see whether Elijah will come and save him.
Then Jesus shouted out again, dismissed his spirit, and died.
Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lord of God, I come. Just as I am, and waiting not to rid my soul of one dark blot, to thee whose blood can cleanse each spot, O Lamb of God, I come. I come broken to be mended. I come wounded to be healed. I come desperate to be rescued. I come empty to be filled. I come guilty to be pardoned by the blood of Christ the Lamb, and I'm welcomed with open arms. Praise God, just as I am, just as I am, and would be lost, but mercy and grace my freedom brought, and now to glory in your cross, O Lamb
Now look, the curtain secluding the holiest place in the temple was split apart from top to bottom. And the earth shook, and rocks broke, and tombs opened, and many godly men and women who had died came back to life again. After Jesus' resurrection, they left the cemetery and went into Jerusalem and appeared to many there. The soldiers at the crucifixion and their sergeant were terribly frightened by the earthquake and all that had happened. They exclaimed,
Surely this was God's Son.
and many women who had come down from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. When evening came, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, one of Jesus' followers, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. And Pilate issued an order to release it to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and placed it in his own new rock-hewn tomb and rolled a great stone across the entrance as he left. Both Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting nearby, watching. The next day, at the close of the first day of the Passover ceremonies, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate and told him,
Sir, that liar once said, after 3 days I will come back to life again. So we request an order from you sealing the tomb until the third day, to prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and then telling everyone he came back to life. If that happens, we'll be worse off than we were at first.
Pilate told them,
Use your own temple police. They can guard it safely enough.
So they sealed the stone and posted guards to protect it from intrusion.
There was a moment when the lights went out, when death had lost its victory. tread